It seems quiet in here now. Like most libraries and archives, the Helmerich Center for American Research is a place for hushed voices and polite whispers. But if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, this is a place filled with voices and visions, filled with the spirits of an undying past. This is the place where the past is alive and speaks to us across the great divide of time. These voices tell stories about struggle, discovery, suffering, and compassion. They are echoes of great success and terrible failure. Glory is here, but so is tragedy. At HCAR, you'll find American stories, stories as rich and varied as all the peoples and cultures that have called this vast continent home. Those voices and visions and the stories they tell are revealed in maps, drawings, letters, diaries, and photographs. Thomas Gilcrease gathered voices and visions from the past. And like the art at the Gilcrease Museum, his documentary and archival collections are deep in time and continental in sweep. And now those collections are here at HCAR. What they ask is what Thomas Gilcrease asked, that we listen and learn. Memory is a fragile thing. Without memory, we're lost. Without memory, we are strangers in a strange land. Think of HCAR as a memory palace. This is a place to gather, preserve, and explore the memories that tell us who we were, who we are, and who we might yet become. HCAR invites us into rooms filled with stories, and these stories have important lessons for us. Thomas Gilcrease wanted us to learn those lessons, and with learning on his mind, he called his creation an Institute for American History and Art. And all of the parts of T.U. Gilcrease, the museum, HCAR, and the gardens, they are that unique institute. Thomas Gilcrease imagined a place where we could learn about the past, think about the present, and ponder the future. With the opening of HCAR, T.U. Gilcrease is that place. The great folklorist Alan Lomax once said, "The essence of America lies not in the headline heroes, but in the everyday folks who live and die unknown, and yet leave behind their dreams as legacies." Dreams and legacies, they reveal the American encounter, and what began in 1492 was not an old world Europe discovering a new world America. Think of what happened as many old worlds all caught up in one grand and sometimes terrifying mutual discovery. The shelves at the Helmerich Center for American Research will soon be filled with hints and clues about the shapes and sizes, the meanings and consequences of that mutual discovery. Consider the stories of discovery revealed by the works of French Jesuit missionary Louis Nicolas. Beginning in 1664, Father Nicholas traveled throughout eastern Canada and as far west as Lake Superior and south into Iroquois homelands. In a series of brilliantly colored paintings, now part of what is called the Codex Canadiensis, Nicholas portrayed a world soon transformed by relentless waves of change. At the edge of Lake Superior, he met this man, an Eastern Dakota chief from what is now Minnesota. Nicholas documented Huron Indians on fishing expeditions. He drew plants unknown to Europeans like the chokecherry and two kinds of persimmons. Nicholas gives us one of the earliest European depictions of two iconic North American animals, the beaver and the otter. And like many of us, he was attracted to birds. His birds, finches, scarlet tanager, eastern bluebird, and bobolink, are as vivid as anything done by John James Audubon. 2.5 centuries after Nicholas and his Codex Canadiensis, a group of Cheyenne and Arapaho Army scouts stationed at Fort Reno in Indian Territory used blank ledger books to depict their memories of a native world rapidly passing away. While artists like Red Eagle and Standing Bull mostly portrayed scenes important to them as warriors, they did not neglect moments like these: a man and a woman at deeply personal times in their lives. Separated one from the other by time and space, the Codex and the Fort Reno ledger books offer us a glimpse of times gone by. They bring us into the presence of people, places, and stories that might otherwise slip from memory. Thomas Jefferson once told Lewis and Clark to map the face of the country. He was thinking about the physical landscape, the rivers and mountains of the West. But he might have ordered his explorers to portray the faces of the country. At the Helmerich Center for American Research, the face and faces of the continent wait to meet us and share their stories. Samuel Mitchell's 1838 map of the United States traces the political boundaries of the nation in the years just before territorial expansion into the West and Southwest. This is the United States a decade before the Mexican War and the California Gold Rush. Look closely at the western edge of the map. There are signs here of more changes in the land. Here are the lands assigned to the Kickapoo, Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, and Osage peoples. Mitchell's map tells the story. Removal of native peoples had become a fact of life in a land-hungry American empire. When Santa Fe merchant and adventurer Josiah Gregg made his last trip across the southern plains in 1840, he passed through the famous Cross Timbers in what is now Hughes County, Oklahoma. His diary and papers are at HCAR. The diary entry for April 7, 1840, gives us a close look at this remarkable feature on the face of the country. Gregg called the Cross Timbers a dismal tangle of briars, twisted trees, and vines, all so thickly matted that man or beast can hardly pass through them without a road. In a moment of grim reflection, Gregg imagined a time when Indian warriors might hide in the cross timbers and wage war on his fellow travelers. Mitchell's map shows us a political landscape. Gregg's diary portrays an untamed, even threatening natural world. But HCAR also shows us the faces of the country. Those human faces reveal a complex human geography, the crazy quilt of ethnicities and races that was and is America. Perhaps no photograph shows this better than one taken by W.S. Prettyman as the nation entered the 20th century. Looking at us across time, this Oklahoma Territory household is the faces of America. Here is an extended family, multiracial and spanning several generations. The family patriarch is here, so are the children, so are two Native American women. And here are two fiddlers ready to spin out a tune for a country dance. Gathered alongside their house, these natives and newcomers share a common landscape. If there is a signature photograph for a large part of the American experience, this must be it. The vast range and depth of the Helmerich Center for American Research collections reveal a continent in motion, one always changing, never static. The HCAR collections show the many shapes of change. They tell stories about human beings on the move, some willingly drawn by the promise of a better life, others compelled to move by government policy or the decisions of a slave owner or tidal waves of epidemic disease. With his Creek ancestry, Thomas Gilcrease was acutely aware of Indian removal. He collected a wide variety of materials documenting both the political history of removal and the human experiences on those many trails of tears. One of those documents is a haunting, almost prophetic letter from a Cherokee man, Parch Corn, to his son. The letter is undated but plainly written before the actual removal journeys. In the letter, Parch Corn fears the coming of the army. Removal now seems inevitable. I thought I would tell you this, he warns his son, that you may be ready when they come. And come they did. The faces of removal were not only those of native people, but of enslaved African Americans. Slavery was a fact of life not only in the white South, but in the Native American South as well. H-Car offers a way to study the complexities of what historian Gary Nash calls a world that was red, white, and black. One of the most poignant documents at H-Car is an 1831 bill of sale for a 13-year-old African-American girl named Sissy. She was sold to a Cherokee master for $250. Forced to move by federal policy, many Native people who had adopted the practice of plantation agriculture brought their slaves with them into Indian Territory. Those African Americans were unwilling pioneers on the way west. Most of their names are now lost to us, but at H-Car we meet them for a moment in documents like the Captain John Bengi muster roll for 1838-1839. That list of Cherokee families bound for Indian Territory includes the number of Negroes owned by each head of household. Most Cherokee masters on the list owned a handful of slaves, but one master owned 14. 11 were children. As always, the faces of the country were changing. The first overland trail into the West was not the Oregon Trail, it was the Trail of Tears. And those who marched that trail were unwilling travelers. Americans are a restless people. While we talk about home sweet home, we've always been drawn by the lure of the road, whether the road was the Oregon Trail or Route 66. The road promised change that might lead to a better life. In the years after removal, white Americans eagerly made Western journeys. They were farmers and settlers hungry for land, and for many of them, the Indian lands of the Southern Plains seemed the last best hope. The Helmerich Center for American Research has a superb collection of posters and handbills promoting settlement on the plains. It was families like this who imagined Oklahoma as the Garden of Eden. They were the new faces on the land. They came full of hope and all too often found hard-scrabble lives in an unforgiving country. H-Car is home to countless stories about change, where it came from, and what it meant. Change came from large-scale ranching and the big business of raising cotton. Change came from the plow and the oil derrick. Railroads remade the landscape. These engines of change brought the world into the West and the West into the world. And in American life, change is the one sure thing.